Podcast, a platform created to entertain, educate, and evolve the modern-day deer hunter.
I'm Jared Scheffler from Whitetail Adrenaline. We're kind of off the radar a bit, so many of the listeners maybe never seen the videos. We've been producing these videos for 15 years, DVD, but digital now too. And we built our the first video was kind of a public and by permission, and then we launched the all public land series, and we did that for 13 seasons. And now we're about to release our first season of Uncuffed, which is mostly public with a little bit of door knocking. So, in fact, actually, now the last 2 seasons have been that. We still, all our bow kills have been public, though. So I actually gave too much away there. I'm supposed to keep it mystery.
I like it. I like the evolution, too, to be honest with you. I think it's cool that you're doing that. I'm excited to see how it just adds a little flavor.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things that led to it. When Jim and my cousin and I, started the first video, that obviously wasn't in all public. It was some public and some by permission. We really loved the public.
What year was? I'm sorry. What year was it? What year was that?
That would have been 2007.
Okay.
So when we did that, and we loved the public land thing, and then we were like, well, let's down the road, let's produce like a by permission, just knock on door permission that anybody else could do too. Not I know this person or whatever. So we didn't refer to it as Uncuffed. We just called it the by permission series that someday we'll do. Well, we got so caught up with the public land thing and we loved all of that. And that was enough to keep us busy for many years. And not that we needed anything more to keep us busy, but we kind of went through a little spurt there in 2017 was really the season. We just had a struggle season, and which doesn't generally happen once you fine tune your aggressive on the ground approach. You're keeping so many of the variables in your pocket that you don't run into that very often. You'll have generally a lot of good seasons. So it was just an off fluke season, but we had a number of situations where we felt like we could have knocked on the door and gotten permission when we seen a big one or had a good feeling on a piece or whatever. And it was actually in that video recorded the first time. Chancey said, well, if we just went uncuffed, and that's just the way Chancey is, he'll rattle off words that you're like, what do you mean? Break that down. What do you mean uncuffed? What's uncuffed? Well, if we just went door knocking, And so, that sat in our heads for a few years, and then I kept it pretty quiet. But we filmed Uncuffed the first time here in 2020, which I'm getting closer to getting that. That was a monster project, and it was our best public land season with a slice of Uncuffed. So it's a monster to produce. So I think just the raw footage on that season is, I'll go check here in a minute, but I think it's 52 terabytes of content.
No kidding.
In terms of how many hard drives, how much footage? Yeah, it's like 52. I'll look it up right now.
Wow.
But it's a lot.
No kidding. Yeah, that's one thing you guys have always done is bang for your buck. When you buy a DVD, put a piece of content out, there's a lot of hours of content there. I don't know if people realize that, but I certainly did over the course of the years. When I get a 3 or 4 disc set and it's 12 hours worth of content or whatever, is like, man, this is awesome.
Yeah, no, it's I've thought about that more recently. It's like, man, I dream of a 2 hour long project now.
Yeah, I bet you do.
I mean, those are a lot of work in and of itself too. Um,
There's nothing that even comes close to the value that what a consumer is getting for the amount of content for what they pay for. I mean, you think that YouTube's free, but it's not. They're taking up your time with advertising and you being on their platform. When you pay whatever it is for a disc or a set, the amount of uninterrupted premium content that's there, there is nothing that even comes close to that.
oh, well, thank you. No, I did. I mean, I really appreciate hearing that.
Well, I consume all forms of hunting media and have excessively for a very long time. And I came to recognize that, like, for what is here and for what you're paying for it, there's like no better value to be had.
Well, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
I mean, no, I mean it. I really appreciate hearing that because sometimes you're grinding so like during these edits, you're grinding, you're putting all these hours in. Hey, and you start to question like, is it worth it? Is it, do people really enjoy it that much? Do people really like it that much? And, we launched our loyalty pre-order back in late August and people were not very active on social media, but I mean, people came out of the woodwork and it was really great to see that it from my perspective, when you're packing this amount of work and effort and hours into a project, I think we're going to end up being right around 4,000 hours on the edit on this project by the time it's done.
Uh,
It just and there's so much stuff that I'm letting go that's just not going to make it, that it's like, well, it's a decent stock, but you know, how long a video do you want? 25 hours? Like
right.
that creates a lot of work in other ways. Like in sound, I spend a lot of time on sound. I spend a lot of time on stabilizing footage and resizing it and grading it and making it look good. And so as that hours gets up, or to say 25 hours, now you're double the workload in those departments compared to say 12 hours of runtime.
You were saying about people coming out, and you know, I don't know exactly what it is, but I'll say this. I watch, like I said, I excessively consume deer hunting content, right?
Uh-huh.
My family gets pretty irritated with me because if I get the remotes, they're like, we know what dad's putting on and we're kind of had enough of it. But with that said, they enjoy Whitetail Adrenaline. And I think it's the music and the pace and the action. But my son
Sure.
and my wife both, who she never really much had interest in deer hunting, she enjoys watching it. And it's uniquely different than what else is out there. And for me, if the whole family likes something, that doesn't happen that often. Like in
Sure.
any category, whatever. The amount of bullshit movies that I've had to watch over the course of the last 5 years is asinine. So when we can all sit down and agree on something and everybody thinks it's cool, that is such a win. And I got to tell you this, my kid, because we've been watching these for years, he knows your guys' lingo. So when we go out and we're going deer hunting, he's like, hey, is that public? Is that private? Is that public? Is that private? And just for a young kid to really have a grasp and an understanding of that, and some of the other things that he says is just, it's funny. It's because he's watched a lot of that and he enjoys
Sure.
it. I
Sure.
sometimes I wonder because his friends will come over and they'll ask if they can watch TV in the basement. I've got that 100-inch projector in the basement.
Yeah.
Well, I just have a HDMI out to a Blu-ray player. I don't have any internet or anything down there. So they're limited to what discs are in the basement. And oftentimes my son will be like, can we watch, he calls it Adrenaline. So he'll say, can we watch Adrenaline? And I'll put it on and then I'll see and hear some things. And I'm like, the neighbor kids are gonna go. My neighbors probably all think I'm the strangest guy in the block because their kids go back and they're like, yeah, these guys were chasing around herd bulls and running arrows through them and this and that, and they just don't have exposure to that.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's kind of funny.
No, that's cool to hear that what you said there about your whole family can sit down and all parties seem to enjoy it. You're right. That's difficult to do, and that's actually nothing that I've ever like thought about when I'm producing it and editing it. Like, I mean, I've thought about it like, okay, I think kids would like this or whatever, but
Sure.
I haven't really like honed in on that in any sort of way, kind of in the way that you described it, I guess. Like, hey, is this something that the whole family would enjoy? Like a broad demographic, a broad,
I, I think
audience.
I think it's just organic because of the pace and the action, right? Like people
Sure.
love action movies and people like things that move quick, and your production does that. So it grabs attention and it holds it, and then it's constantly changing. So I think for that simple reason, just the organicness of the way that you guys film it and produce it, that it grabs more people.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense.
So yeah, man, I'm glad we get to do this. Like I told you, guys will be listening to this. It's going to be the day prior to. Well, it's a podcast. Somebody could be listening to this 16 years later. But
Yeah.
if they got their life together, they're listening to this the day it comes out. And it's the day before opening day archery season. So if they've even played their cards right, they're out of work early and heading to hunt camp or something along those lines. But
Right.
yeah, it was great timing to
Yeah.
have you on here, and I've had you on the
Yeah. No,
list.
thanks for doing that. I didn't realize that you're releasing this the day before Michigan's opener there, and thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, man. So, all right, let's hit a couple things. You said it, aggressive on the ground approach. So I'm going to bring up to you the fact, I'm sure you've paid attention how the mobile hunting has changed, or maybe the style or the culture of deer
Yeah.
hunting has changed over the course of, let's call it, the last 10 years,
Yep.
with everybody going ultralight and moving. But you guys are kind of like excessive, maybe, right? You're not even taking time to put a tree stand up. I feel like in your head, I could say that you might even feel like that just costs you time because you're so confident in the way that you guys just pound ground and find deer nowadays.
Yeah.
So you're not hauling a tree
Yeah.
stand around or sticks or putting up your spot or your camera. Your style's to like cover ground, find deer, get in on them, and kill them, right?
Exactly. So I don't exactly. You kind of hit the nail on the head there with the. There's a couple of things, but we'll touch on this first. That's exactly how I look at it. Like that's my issue with dragging around very much for gear, whether that be a tree stand or whatever it might be, is it's making it me less versatile as a hunter, less adaptable as a hunter to the situation as it's unfolding, or maybe as it's about to unfold or going to unfold. And that's going to leave me high and dry in certain situations. On another flip side, even if I didn't film, this is exactly how I would do it, is on the ground, because it literally is the way that I love to hunt. And I've been doing it for over 20 years, but I didn't do it exclusively 20 years ago. I just did it sometimes, 21 years ago, and I mean, with the gun, even when I started hunting that, 25 years ago, I was hunting on the ground then quite a bit, but not so much with the bow. Back then it was shimmy up a tree, no tree stand though, mobile, still fairly versatile and adaptable and whatnot. But I did that more. I don't remember, there might've been a few times that first year or two that I did a little bow hunting on the ground, but primarily it was It was more stationary setting in a tree, using a crotch of a tree or whatnot. But truthfully, I just loved hunting on the ground. And as I did it more, I saw that the percentage of encounters and situations, and I didn't, it's not something that I put together at the time other than that in and of itself. So I didn't put together, oh, I'm more adaptable. Oh, I'm more versatile. I didn't like think that out in advance. I just saw the writing on the wall. Like, we're getting more situations, we're getting more encounters. It's significantly higher than when I'm a stationary hunter. And I didn't, dissect it so much right then as to why, other than like, okay, here's some possible theories as to what that is. But I didn't think it was a fluke. There was a point where I realized this isn't a fluke. Like, there's something more here. And I played the whole 10-pound tree stand game for a while too. When I was 17, I bought my first tree stands, so I wasn't climbing up trees in the crotches. And, I was by that point doing some hunting on the ground too, but I bought the 10-pound tree stands and played that game, from 17 till I was 2010. So that would have been 25. So for about 7-8 years, I played that game. And I played the whole pattern them through the summer, watch them, figure them out. Back then ran a couple of 35 millimeter film cameras because they didn't have digital back then. And I found for myself that didn't give me as nearly the leg up that hunting on the ground does. Just once you hone in and make that good, or get good at that. Looking back on it, I wouldn't trade all of that stuff for just strictly hunting on the ground. There'd be no way that I'd do that. And I also believe that if you want to become, I don't want to go down this too much, but for my own personal self, I believe that in order for me to become the best hunter that I can be, I put all the products aside and, just me, the weapon, the arrow, the bow, the arrow. And I cheat a little bit. I run binoculars and good ones, so I cheat a little bit. I don't want to call it cheating, it's like, but I'm saying I don't exactly adhere to that. But I know that if I do that for 10, 15 years and don't rely on all of this other stuff, that's really going to hone my hunting skills, whether that be, obviously you got sight, you've got hearing, but you've got general feel and of situations that the more experiences you get, that just hones in. And it's like, no, I don't need to waste my time walking way back into that pace. And here's why, and it just all kind of clicks and comes to you. Yeah, that's really hard to put into words, though, what I'm describing there.
It's funny that you said stationary because I just have never used that term in referencing a hunting style, but it's clearly the definition of, it's the opposite of the being mobile, is being stationary. So it's just funny that you said that. I won't be able to erase that out of my memory when I look at the way some people hunt and think they're a stationary hunter.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. There's times where we tiptoe into a spot, and it just calls for being stationary for a period of time. Like sure. Maybe you're up against a private line fence. You're only 100 yards away from it, but everything looks and feels right. So maybe you hang out there for an hour or two. I'm stationary in that setup. I don't want to like pigeonhole myself and just say like, oh, I'm always moving, because I don't think that's necessarily the right call all the time. But in the event I decide I'm going to pull the plug, I don't have to rip a bunch of gear down, and it's not a big hindrance. And I can just, right. Oh, I'm going to go check this out up on this ridge, or whatever. I can just carry on about my way. and or if I see a big one kind of cut through in the woods in this particular case, you know, and I'm new to this piece. I've never been in there. In just a few minutes, I could shimmy my way kind of up there, realizing like, ooh, that's maybe like a main corridor of some sort. That buck's cruising. You know, it's quite often I see bucks cruising in similar kind of fashions through the woods.
Right.
Not always, but you know, I'm able to adapt to that. That's just one example of being adaptable and versatile to that situation.
I'm very much in tune with what you're talking about because I traditionally grew up a bait hunter, you know, on private land, hunting out of shacks over bait piles. So you were staked in, like
Yeah.
stationary to the, you know, to the max for the most part. And then we just started to venture out a little bit, and then we came across your guys' DVD series, and it's like, oh wow, look at these guys, what these guys are doing, and they're
Look at these clowns.
yeah. It was the timing was impeccable, right? Because we were about the same age, and we were getting after it, and you guys were getting after it, and we'd be at hunt camp watching the DVDs, and it was like the most relatable thing, you know. So we're paying attention to that, and we're just the age too where we want to kind of venture out, right? So start learning to be mobile, and I always say it, keep, you know, my friend Brian Broderick said this to me, just keep your pack light, and so that you can be able to move and pivot. That goes outside of deer hunting, right? Even in life, like keep your pack light, be ready to pivot and move, don't be staked in case something
Right.
changes or something happens. And with deer hunting, it's I'm really coming into like a hybrid, what you're talking about between the stationary and the mobile, because I think it's just maybe a product of your personality that one, you guys are obviously trying to kill big deer and you're trying to do it consistently, and two, you guys are just wired. You guys are wound for sound. You want to move and go. And for me, I oftentimes enjoy the calmness and serenity after going 100
Yeah.
miles an hour all year. It's nice to sit down for 2 or 3 hours and bird watch, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I get that.
you're
Yeah.
live. You're so. But anyways, I recognize how effective you guys are and why you are. And I don't know if you know. Do you know who Corey Jacobson is? He's a
He's an elk caller, big time elk caller.
Yeah. He said
Yeah.
something that about, you know, same thing with the elk hunting. A lot of guys will, you know, backpack in 5-6 miles, set their camp up, and he's like, "You're
You're
done.
live. You're done.
You're
You just
done."
committed.
He's like,
Right.
"I don't leave my truck until I know that there's elk around." And he's figured
Exactly.
out a style how to do that
Yeah.
by, you know, means of but he's ultra mobile. He's not committing to anything until he knows that there's this high percentage of odds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's
So,
I didn't know that about Corey there. I knew he was obviously a really good caller and a really good elk hunter, but that was the advice I gave Tanner. You know, we took this same model that we use with hunting whitetails, and we took that when we went west to elk. And so right out of the gate, we did pretty well on elk with that mentality of like, before we go, you know, beat up this mountain. And, you know, and I see this all the time. Guys work out all summer long to physically get in shape to the mountain. And then they look on their aerial and then they do exactly that. They go way back in. And I don't want to get too far away from the point that you brought up. Everybody has their thing, like in hunting. Like sometimes you were saying, like you like to just kind of go out there and listen to the birds chirp and just get away from the grind. Like that's, you know, even to an eastern elk hunter that's going to go west for the first time, if that's what he's like, man, I just love the idea of getting back in there 5 miles from setting up my camp and doing that. And you know what? I didn't kill an elk, but I had a great time. Cool. Like that's great too. I mean, everybody finds, but on the terms of being successful on elk, it's not very often we went elk hunting in new states and not done pretty decent, because we do exactly that. And that's exactly in about 5 minutes this was 3 seasons ago. Tanner called me and he's like, I'm going to do some elk hunting. I've never done it before. What's your advice? I said, don't leave the vehicle until you got a visual. And then now you're you're not physically drained, which that takes a toll then on your mental if you are. Now you got a sense of, you got a point of direction, like, boom, I'm going up there and I'm going to rip that mountain apart for that elk right there. And now you've eliminated a ton of acreage across the mountainside. And so that totally makes sense with what you said that Corey, I mean, obviously he's been doing it much longer than I have and way more successful overall with, I don't know how many years, I think he's a little, older than I am. I'm not sure how long, but probably 30 years he's been elk hunting. So that makes sense. I mean, that's the best advice. And if you were to say one thing about elk hunting, I would say that's the number one thing right there.
Yeah, and I just had my friend Tony Peterson on from Meat Eater, and he just got back from Colorado elk hunting, and I was just mentioning to him that I was very seriously starting to think about putting in some points for some certain states where I have some contacts and understanding of the areas, and he said that he suspected that it would be a less harsh learning curve for a guy like me that's used to pounding around trying to find deer in a big wood setting, because you're like, the deer are working around the pressure and they're in pockets and they know what the people are doing. And he's like, the elk are kind of the same way, like
exactly.
People are more patternable than deer.
Right. Yep. Because when you're sitting back in the vehicle, and don't get me wrong, I mean, sometimes whether it's mountain or deer terrain, sometimes you do got to exit that vehicle and go, maybe it's a couple 300 yards, get up on this ridge point. Now you can see a whole lot more of the mountainside or the hillside or whatever, there's times, but the general reason is you're not giving a massive amount of your investment in time, physical energy, mental capacity. You're not dedicating yourself all on a hunch, all on a suspicion of whatever your mind created about how, if I just get way back in there, I'm going to find him. Well, it don't happen like that every time.
Yeah, you're kind of going on offense, right? And there's a less likelihood that you're just gonna run. You're not counting on just some luck and running into one. You're saying, I'm physically gonna do this. Like, I'm gonna find these elk, deer. I'm gonna find this game. Dude, I'm sure Chancey would agree. It's probably the same way with fishing, right? Like, you're not just gonna sit there and pound the bottom and not get any bites. Like, he's moving.
Yeah, exactly. They were biting here yesterday, but they're not today.
Right?
And that same mentality we take to the hunting too. Like, we might start our day off if this spot in the area was hot yesterday, but if in a little while we sense that it ain't that today, boom, pull the plug. Maybe we check on it in the afternoon or the next day or a few days later. But right now, in this moment, it's not happening here.
How much of what you're doing now is, I mean, you got to have some pretty solid spots banked up after doing this all this time. How much are you relying on, like, some past hunting holes versus, I mean, have you seen every inch of state? I mean, for the amount of time that you've put into this, I know you've probably seen more state land through, or you've probably seen more public land throughout this country than, I don't even know, man. You're up there for sure, right?
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I would imagine there'd be no way that I could say because it's like I haven't kept a tally of how many thousands of pieces.
I'm just thinking, like, who could I compare you to?
I mean, it's actually, even states, whether it's like, take Nebraska, for example. I've bebopped around Nebraska for 15 years, and I took a few-year break from it, at least a few-year break, and found myself on multiple occasions in different parts of the state that I'm like, oh yeah, I was here once.
Nice.
Like, Oh, I didn't, I thought this was new, but no, I've checked this out before. Same thing in North Dakota. That's a state that I've done quite a bit in, not so much in recent times, but it's I've seen a lot of public land, yeah, and I've seen a lot of ground.
I'm
um,
I'm trying to I'm trying to help myself along, to be honest with you, and by proxy of our listenership, help them at the same point be better deer hunters. And I feel I've been kind of pounding on this drum about moving around and just being versatile because I feel
yep.
like it's a really effective way, right? So that's kind of why I'm bringing it up, and that's why I was curious as to like how much are you now relying on your bank or your inventory of spots that you've built versus looking at new ground?
So when we're talking about spots, um, if for people that hunt out of tree stands or stationary settings, like what we were talking, I I'm not looking at like, oh, in this spot, like this 100-yard radius where my tree stand is or whatever. I'm talking like, okay, we got a 2,000-acre piece of public here. We got 160 acres over here. This general area within a 20-mile radius. It's been good in the past, not every year or every time,
Mm-hmm.
but I've had some luck there. Sure, I might be bought back into that area.
County or maybe a portion of a county is
Right,
like what
right. But
you're.
you've seen probably all the videos.
Yes.
It's not that often. You've recognized different physical terrain things, I'm sure, from one video to the other occasionally, maybe. But as far as like where we've actually killed those animals, it's not that often. It's like, oh, this one was 100 yards away from the last one. We killed that one here 2 years ago, 100 yards away. It's not. We don't have that happen very often.
So are you
if,
doing
if that's kind of like what you're talking about, we might kill one a quarter mile away, or a half mile, or a mile or two away, or 10 miles away, but not generally like a spot is in like.
Oh. No shit.
What was all about
I
that.
don't know. I don't know. But we're back. We're back
We're
online.
back.
So
We're back. Yeah. So, not sure where it cut out when I was talking, but I think I kind of got that point across
yes.
of what we were talking about there.
I was just curious how much time or any time are you spending like looking at, I would imagine with elk hunting, but with whitetail too, looking at new areas and maps and topography. Are you doing any of that, or do you?
Hardly ever anymore.
Yeah.
I Let's say I'm gonna go. I decide like, okay, I'm gonna hunt this state, and some of that probably has to do with, like you said, I've been to a lot of different states and a lot of regions and parts of those states to where I don't know all the nooks and crannies and everything like that, but I don't get too invested with it until I'm actually like in the hunt. Like I'll maybe pull up the map and be like, okay, there's a decent amount of public in this area. And that's about all I look at to start out with. I might zoom in a little bit and be like, okay, this is kind of what the landscape sort of looks like. That's about it. With elk, I don't do it at all, really.
Okay.
Well, maybe spend 30 seconds or a minute kind of looking at it just to kind of scope out, like, okay, my percentage of open country versus woods, like, and I don't mind a decent amount of woods as long as I got some meadows that I can hang back from a few miles out and glass them at. If it's all timber for elk, because I don't have years and years of an experience of that, I generally stay away from it on the elk side of things, because it's going to be tougher because I'm not able to get my visuals. I got to go more off a gut feel, and I don't have 30 years of experience that's necessarily going to, I'm not going to have as accurate of a feel as I would say I've done it for 20, 30 years in those situations. Like the bull Tanner shot last year, I spotted that one at 5.6 miles with binoculars. And it was a high wind day, which I actually really like glassing on high wind days, which I got kind of a couple things I do so that the wind isn't really an issue when I'm glassing, but I'm able to, on a high wind day, I can kind of predict, I can eliminate a lot more acreage. Like they're probably not going to be in here, whether it's deer, generally deer more so, but elk too. I'm going to be able to kind of like eliminate a decent amount of acreage just on terrain when it's a high wind day. And then I can really focus my optics in those regions where they're going to be a little bit generally more out of the wind, depending on how strong that wind is and certain variables there. But yeah, that's just an example there, and when you begin to glass long range like that, you begin to be able to cover massive amounts of acreage compared to just glassing a half a mile or a mile out. And then, like with his elk, I couldn't tell, is that a 300-inch bull? Is that a 330 bull? I can't tell that at that distance, but it's like for a brief instance, I caught the flash above his head with the sun when the antlers hit. Like I could tell it was a bull by his body at that distance. And then he got next to a pine tree. Just for an instance, I caught a little glistle, enough to know. And then it's like, okay, his body's this size compared to the cows. He's kind of got this walking gait to him. That's probably a pretty damn good bull. But now we've got a visual. We've got a visual, and we get up there, and it ends up being a pretty damn good bull, 320, 330. So that's just an example of elk. But even with whitetail, I'm glassing 2-3 miles out pretty regularly. Now at that distance, a lot of times I can't tell what they got for headgear, but I can read the animal fairly decent. Not always. I mean, I've been punked before and been like, oh, I think that's a mature buck. And then, but I got the visual and I'm gauging off of his body and the way he is. Like, I think that looks like a mature buck to me. And then, okay, this is what we're going to do to get in closer for a closer look. And then we do. And then we get in there. Generally, though, over the years, I've gotten a pretty good read on it. And, but I'm not afraid to glass that far out, 2-3 miles on deer. Now in the timber, that's a different deal. You're not relying so much on your eyes to glass them at long distance and then engineer a game plan in your mind about how you're going to get in there. You got to be really on point with your eyes in the timber, because you take one step further and they already got you because they're close. Right. They're close. So I did a little bit of that last year, but I didn't. I joined Chansey on a hunt, but I didn't have a tag, and I went for a timber walk just by myself, and for a couple of days did some timber cruising, still hunting, and I found a 155-inch 10-pointer compound range, and I didn't try to push it because I didn't have a tag, but I was like, okay, he's locked down with a doe in the timber here. Chansey was on another big buck on a stalk. And I was basically just like, okay, if he doesn't get that one, we got another one in our back pocket here in the timber. But timber hunting with this mobile fashion, it's different than what I'm talking about out there in that open landscape. You are kind of going a little bit more off a feel of pressure first to eliminate acreage. And then you're going in there, and depending on many variables, like if you don't have a very strong wind, you're not going to be able to move at a very high pace, fast pace through the timber without them seeing or hearing you. Because the wind masks, obviously, your sound, but also a lot of your movement to where you can get away with it quite a bit more. So you got to cover ground slower in the timber. if you don't have a lot of wind generally. But then there's other variables like how far can you see in the timber? You know what I mean? It's kind of
Yeah, you've picked terrain to hunt, right? That caters to that style. It took me a while to recognize this because I would listen to people like the Diaquistos talk
yep,
about just sit back and God, what do they call them? Observation sits. Sit
yep,
back and see what that deer's doing. Have an observation sit, and I'm like, it didn't register right for me because I'm used to hunting big timber and big tracts of big timber. I'm like, I mean, what 40 yards, like 40 yards,
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
and but then when I see the landscape out there, I'm like, oh, there's 10 acres of cedars and 400 acres of crop field around them. Like, you got a pretty good idea where those deer are to start with, and then you pick them apart with glass and see exactly what you're doing, and you figure out, your plan from there. Whereas, like, oftentimes I'm hunting 10,000 acres of cedars, and it's like, where are the deer? That whole, when they talked about that, and it just took me a while to realize how, like, that is very much terrain driven, right? To be able to hunt in that style, and you've probably catered to some states and some topography that allows you to do that, right?
yep, absolutely. To cater to that style that I'm talking about, where I'm glassing them at long distance and things like that, for sure. I mean, back in the earlier videos, we did a decent amount of wooded stuff, and we were, I think, pretty successful
I would
at
say
it.
so.
You haven't seen as much of that in recent times, but I will say this: I think I could go back to the timber now and be more successful than I ever was before, because there's a couple of factors why I say that. One, I've observed these deer and how they operate using contours and terrain so much in the open country that I know to a certain degree some of that information would apply to a wooded scenario. So, for
Interesting.
instance, on high wind days, I can eliminate a decent amount of acreage just based off of that, and I could do the same thing in the woods. And you get the general fluke deer that might not operate that way, but
Can you
you know,
elaborate on that just a little bit? Because I was going to go back and ask you, because you said, like, you were talking about the high wind days, about how I can eliminate this percentage of where they're going to
yeah,
be, and I'm playing that game, like, when I look at a map or where I'm figuring out what I'm doing, like, what can I eliminate?
yeah. Well, so let's break it down a little bit like this. So, like, if it's more hilly terrain and you've got a wind of 20, 25 mile an hour, 20 mile an hour plus, right in there, give or take a bit. Generally, when those deer bed, they're not going to want to be bedded in, where that wind's hitting them real hard. So if you look at your contours, whether you're just using your eyeballs and looking at the landscape, or the contours on your aerial map, you can kind of eliminate, okay, the wind's coming in from this direction. That's going to eliminate this acreage, that acreage. These slopes are going to get hit hard with that wind too. Boom. They're probably going to be bedded in these sort of, I don't like to ever say, oh, they're absolutely going to be, because I've seen fluke deer. I've seen deer do things like, why would you bed right there? Like, I've seen those kind of deers.
That's
I've seen
perfect.
those kind of deer that, so I don't like to set rules and guidelines up like, oh, absolutely, for sure, this is the case. But on a general scale, most of those deer, almost all of them on like a high wind day, you can eliminate a decent amount of that acreage. And now if it's rut and you get a cruising buck, yeah, he's going to break protocol. He might just get completely, he might be tomahawked from breeding does and just got on a 2 mile bender of cruising trying to find another one, and he might just plop right down in the wide open 20 mile an hour gust
Right.
and not care just to get a breather. He might be just exhausted. So you get those fluke situations, but generally speaking, that's how you can year's wind to say eliminate a decent amount of acreage with, and here again, I'm trying to like predict. In that case, I'm not so much trying to predict their corridors as much as where they're going to maybe bed. Now, if you don't have hilly terrain and you got more wooded stuff, okay, obviously you got cedar patches and things like that. That's going to block the wind. You know, cattails, they're excellent at blocking wind. In fact, many times, you know, I've seen deer in high wind just literally bed in those cattails, you know, and maybe not so much when there's a lot of like wooded stuff and swampy wooded stuff surrounded those cattails, maybe, you know, sometimes, but I'm saying those like drier cattail beds and stuff, beds, not deer beds, drier cattail, you know, where it's not water, you know, but it's dry. The cattail, you know, it's dried
Sure.
up. The cattails are still there. I mean, at high wind days, if you don't have a lot of wooded stuff around, and I'm kind of getting away from the wooded stuff for temporarily for a minute here, but you don't have a lot of wooded stuff around. Well, those deer, a lot of times in that high wind, they'll just go in those cattails 15, 20 yards and plop down a lot of times, get out of the wind. So here's how we're using. I'm basically giving you a few different scenarios just to kind of get the wheels turning in your head, how those deer might, okay, we've got a strong wind day. Normally that's crappy for hunting, but you know what? I'm going to take to the ground here, and this is how I'm going to visualize where I'm going to eliminate acreage based on that wind. Like they're probably not going to, and then you can go further and you can be like, okay, they're still going to want to use a little bit of that wind current to, you know, catch, you know, hunters, predators, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So they're still going to use that wind. So that, again, like, okay, if I were to use the wind, but I want to be out of the wind, but I want a little bit of that wind current, because generally they rely on that, especially in a high pressure state like Michigan, you know. Now you can fine tune it even further and eliminate even more acreage. Like, okay, this bed spot with these contours, this wind coming in like this, they're probably going to, okay, I got 100 acres. They're probably going to be within this little 3-acre part of it, or this little 2-acre part, or here, but you just eliminated a lot of acreage. So basically what that allows me to now do is I can go in there still hunting, which is basically cruising through the woods. Because it's high wind, I can get away at moving at a higher pace. But as I approach those pockets, I'm approaching them in a way where those deer aren't going to smell me. And now I'm putting on the brakes a lot, and I'm going to spend some time glassing those kind of pockets. Does that kind of
Yep.
make sense?
Yeah, you're coming in on a parallel to where you assume the deer are going to be bedded up.
So generally when I'm approaching this, especially in timber, but in the wide open country, I do this too. If I've got a visual on a big buck, or I've got a feeling that one could be bedded here, so let's say a bedding area or a bedding spot, I'm going to approach that in a way where, you know, it might not be straight downwind, but definitely not going to be able to smell me. But I'm going to approach that coming straight in towards that animal or towards that bedding spot. Because when you get in the woods, you've got it's a very contrast environment, meaning you've got a lot of shadows that get created from the trees, and you got a lot of highlights that gets created from obviously the sun, or even if it's not sunny, it's not so bad, but sunny days are real bad. You know, you get a lot of shadows and highlights, high contrast environment. So if you're going sideways to that animal or that bedding spot, you're at a high risk. Your amount of movement for them to pick you up is a lot greater. If you ever watch like a lion sneak in on something, or a panther, or a leopard, or anything, or a coyote, a wolf, they detect their game from, say, a distance. Let's say in this case they detect it from a distance, and they're going to get closer. They might sideline that animal, but they're going to do it in a way where that animal never sees them, and they're going to do that until they can come straight in on that animal. And then they start coming straight in because their movement's a lot less. if they're coming straight in. Does that kind of make sense?
You're saying straight in with them looking at you, or you're coming in straight in behind them?
I'm just coming in straight towards their direction. So I'm not coming in at some angle where from their eyes they could. How do I explain this maybe a little bit better?
I'm envisioning what you're saying in my head, but I just want to make sure that it's clear.
Okay. We're not a four-legged creature, right? But a cat is, a wolf is, right? What I'm saying is they're not broadside. They're not quarter and two coming in on that animal. They're coming like head on, like their asses behind them, their head straight ahead. And that basically eliminates a lot of sideways movement.
I understand that.
And especially in the timber, even when I was doing this last fall, in the timber, I was approaching all the spots that I thought deer would be. I was approaching those spots mainly using that as my advantage. And that's why generally I can detect them even in the timber. I'll pick them up visually, not always, but I'll pick them up before they ever see me more times than not. And in those 2 days, I had two good bucks and a couple of small ones too. But only one buck caught me first, and I was doing all that at a slow walking pace. I was walking like I wasn't stopping between footsteps. When I was walking, I had enough wind I could get away with it. But I was approaching all those spots coming more straight in. So I wasn't caught sideways where in relation. It's really hard for me to describe what I'm talking about there. But basically, like, if you YouTube, like, watch a cat sneak in on something, watch a wolf sneak in on a prey, watch a lion, and you watch how they approach that last, say, 10, 15, 20 feet, you'll see what I mean compared to if you watch them further out, they might move broadside for a little ways until they get the angle right and the situation right to where that animal can't smell them or whatever, and then they come straight in.
Yeah, so are you're staying out of their peripheral vision? Obviously, I mean, that's you'd like for that to be the case, but is it always the case?
I would like for that to be the case. Every situation's different. So if I do have to move broadside to them for a period of time, I just got to do it a lot slower so my movement isn't magnified.
Right.
If that makes sense. Whereas,
Yeah,
if I'm coming straight in, I can move at a higher rate because I've lessened my movement a lot with those shadows and highlights and the timber and stuff. I guess the simplest way to explain this is you and your buddy go out in the woods and get 50 yards apart and have your buddy walk broadside to you, like he's walking by you almost, versus straight in. And then you'll see what I mean by the movement is way accentuated. So I approach those bedding locations in that same kind of way. Or if I've got one bedded, I try my best to approach coming straight in.
Yeah, I'm understanding now. Like, you did a good job explaining to me because at first I was a little bit confused, but now
I've talked about that one a few times, and it's always I get in there and I know what I mean, but it's really hard to explain.
And I'm seeing it now, and obviously I'm thinking about it too, right? It's probably nice if you can put something in between you and them. I mean, just a little bit of something helps really, and you're just coming on a line.
For sure. I always try to do that if I can,
Right, but you're not zigzagging this way and that way. You're just coming on a line.
Yeah, and here again, going back to I don't like to set any rules. There's certain situations I've found myself in where that is my only option. I do have to kind of zig and I do have to kind of zag.
Right.
So if I set that, that's what I'd call like a methodology. And I don't like to set up methodologies with hunting. And like, this is the way, this is the only way, this is the only way to shoot the bow. This is the only way to hunt. I don't like to do that because you got to break those rules sometimes in order to for certain situations. That's not going to be conducive, and it's not a one size fits all. It's not always the best in this particular case, like it's not going to be the best for me to come in straight on this animal because he's literally going to be able to see me. I've got grass that's 3 inches tall. So I'm going to have to kind of zig down here, zigzag down there. So that's an extreme case, but I think you get where I'm going with that.
I do, man. Like that's a helpful piece of advice because I now that you're saying that, and I'm thinking about scenarios where I was in the woods and somebody walked up on me, and like, yeah, somebody comes paralleling you. It's like, yeah, they're just in a big frame and it's a lot of movement. But if somebody's walking on a string right towards you, man, they could get pretty damn close to you before you have a clue they're there.
Right. Exactly. So
Nice.
that's actually the best way that I've probably better than how I explained it right there. Yep.
Well, I like analogies for my simple brain, so
Well, yeah, no, I don't think you got a simple brain, but and I mean that in all good things.
right. Listen, anything specifically about what you were saying about you said now, given what you've seen and the time that you spent in that open country and how deer fill up terrain, that it would change, or you feel like you'd do things maybe, or you'd be more effective, I think is what you said in
Yeah,
timber. Like
yeah.
what type of areas are you focusing on, or are you thinking? What's your thought process there? Like, what has you thinking that I'm going to be more successful in these areas than I was in the past?
Well, a couple of things. One, my eyes. I've had to rely. So just like when I went to hunting more of these open country deer and started to do that a lot more, I realized they rely on their eyes a lot more than a wooded animal does. It's not that the wooded animal doesn't have a good set of eyes as well, but those open country deer, they come to rely on that aspect of their sense more than they do, say, their hearing or their smell. Like, it doesn't mean that those Western deer don't smell very good, can't smell very good or don't use that. It's just they have a stronger set of eyes. They're very honed and they're very good at picking things up. And so with me hunting that open country and relying on my eyes so much over the years, my eyes have gotten better. I pick up animals in stuff that I wouldn't have been able to pick them up in 10 years ago. Not to the rate that I can now. And so I know that my eyes have gotten a lot better. So in the timber, that's super crucial when you're still hunting and, moving through it. It's super critical. It's because you got a very limited time. If you're on the move, like you're at a slow walking pace or a walking pace, your eyes got to be on point because you could take one step further and boom, they got you. And whereas like in the open country, you can get away with that a little bit longer. You've already probably got your visual and whatnot. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, it does.
So in that sense, and it may not seem like a big deal, but I know how important that is in the timber. I mean, every step, one step prior, and you would have seen them. That can make all the difference as far as how often you can pick them up before they see you. So that would be one reason. The other reason is I have a way better ability to eliminate acreage based on certain things, like especially the wind of what we've already talked about. That's a big one right there. So those would be the two biggest reasons, I would say.
Okay.
And I grew up hunting the swamps and decent sized timber, so I already have quite a bit of experience in that. I just haven't done that as much over the last few years, 5 years or
Yeah,
better.
sure.
I haven't done as much of that, but also I've been blessed with so many hunting situations of being in tight on mature bucks, right? So my the more situations you put yourself in like that, the better you're going to handle those situations. Let me explain to you what I'm trying to say here. a guy that hunts for 10 years in a tough state and finally gets his crack at a mature buck, he's got a lot higher rate of screwing it up than a guy that goes and hunts. That's one thing. Like, yeah, a state like Iowa, it's an easier state to kill a big buck than, say, Michigan, for sure. But the hunter that lives in Iowa and has hunted Iowa, he's got a tremendously more amount of experience when those big animals come in. So he wouldn't do probably so well going to Michigan and finding a big buck and getting on it like a good Michigan hunter can do. But he's probably a lot better at connect. And I'm just using this as an example of just pure numbers based of, like, obviously the guy that's had 100 experiences with mature bucks in close is going to be able to capitalize and make that all. And in those,
he knows how to manage the emotion.
Exactly. And so in that regard, in that aspect, he's going to do pretty well. And then I have another fortunate thing that I've been able to edit these videos for 15 years. And that's one thing that has helped me a lot. So, like, I don't enter the season rusty because I've edited all this content. So I'm very sharp and still on point with it. And I've watched all these situations unfold and, like, what went wrong with them. And that gets so baked into your, basically, like, your subconscious mind. It gets so baked, all these little details. And sometimes when you're editing, you pick up things that you didn't at the time of the hunt that, like, ooh, I didn't catch that. Like, I didn't catch that little wind gust right there. And I didn't catch it at the time, but that's exactly what happened. And, you know, and you catch all these little things. So, you know, you film and produce that amount of content for 15 years and you're, you know, one of the main editors behind it all and watching it all unfold. Plus you had a lot of those experiences. I think it was 50 some bucks that I was either there for as the hunter or the guy filming it, or on a few occasions doing the deer drive. But it was like the first, like, 54 kills. I was there for all of them. And then I got to edit. That was before I had anybody else editing. So I edited all of them too. So I got to see, and then that doesn't include all the ones that went wrong, you know, all those misses and screw ups you've seen over the years, plus some that, you know, a lot of situations where we didn't get great footage or whatever. You know, a lot of that stuff I still went through and edited it to a certain degree to realize, I don't have time to make that fit. But I've been blessed in that way too, to have that. It's not just the hunting experience. It's all documented on the fly. So I get to see all the rawness of all those situations. So it's gotten me very, very well honed.
Yeah. That's like the coach watching the game afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah, I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. You're, like, breaking down plays and shit.
Right. He was there for the moment, but let me watch that again. And then if you're the editor on it,
right,
you've watched it so many damn times,
right,
that it gets so baked into you.
That's crazy. I didn't think about that, but yeah, that is going to have a major impact on your amount of information that you're taking in.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I believe it has. You know, I didn't really start thinking about that until, it was probably a few years ago.
Well, I remember you telling me about how deer react to arrows when they get shot at, and how many arrows have you seen come out of a bow and go at a deer and see the reactions, right?
Well, and right, I remember telling you about that, and you know that's one of my issues. I shouldn't say that's one of my issues. That's one of my struggles with archery today, actually is, and I had an epiphany moment back in 2010, and I was a really good shooter with a compound. You know, I shot my first mature buck with a Scott Longhorn back tension hinge release at 52 yards through the heart. You know, I mean, I was a good shooter, and I was on, you know, in my mind, I was invincible. Like, it didn't matter whose bow I shot. I'm going to shoot it good. Right. Well, then I started hunting these deer on the ground in these high tension situations. And I watch how these animals are reacting to arrows because these animals are mature and have us pegged and all these things. And all of a sudden it was like, wow, I can't depend on micro accuracy as much, you know, anymore. And in this particular case, I had I had 1 second to pull this shot off. Like if I give it 2 more seconds to settle into everything, that animal's gone. I can read his reaction. Like he's a 5-year-old buck. He's not going to give me the 3 seconds I need here or whatever. I need to let it go. And I'm rushing things. And so, I just edited a piece. I'll give you a really good example. So years ago, I was pretty quiet on this. This was about 18 years ago. So this was before the videos. I worked when I was 17 years old, I was setting up all the bows at this Matthews and Hoyt dealer back in the day. This is stuff that most people don't know about, but, and I laid quiet on this because back in that time, talking about shooting a deer at 50, 60 yards, that was a very controversial thing back then. A lot of people didn't have all the information on shooting the bows like they have today and things. And so that's become a very comfortable thing to shoot a deer at 50, 60 yards now compared to back then. But I realized back then from what I was seeing with how these animals reacted, well, I'd much rather take a shot at a deer at 50, 60 yards back then than I would at 35, because at 35, I saw them react so much more. Not that a deer at 50, 60 wouldn't, but I oftentimes didn't see it reacting quite to the degree, not nearly to the degree as like one at 35.
Because of the noise?
Because of the noise. They're close to the situation. And obviously, you get strong wind and you got good cover noise like that. And obviously, and they don't have you pegged and they're not looking at you and they're not watching the arrow come toward this object come towards them. There's a lot of variables in there that can shift that. And I'll give you a good example. I've seen deer drop what I think is probably pushing 16 inches, but maybe it's 14, but it's a lot at 35 yards. I've seen that. And I just cut a piece here a couple of weeks ago with Tanner, him and Ethan. So they're out there, they're in this wide open grass stuff. This buck comes streaking through this cedar thicket. They were kind of on the edge of this cedar thicket. This buck comes streaking through. They're caught in the broad sunlight. And Ethan had to grab the camera. And it's a big camera, but he had to grab it, whirl it. Tanner's stopping the animal, grabbing his bow, stops him before he's even drawn. The animal's looking right at him, 34 yards. Tanner draws back. I've never seen a guy draw back and be able to send an arrow so fast, and make it look good. Like, okay, this is what he does. Like he just pulled it off really good. But nonetheless, he knows, because he's got a lot of hunting experience, a deer at that distance should drop minimum 6 to 8 inches at 34 yards. When you're in the broad daylight with two guys, you stopped him before you're drawn, and he's got you pegged at 34 yards. That deer's probably going to get a minimum of 6 to 8 inches of drop. Probably going to be more like 12 to 14 at that distance. But the deer barely ducked, maybe 2 inches, maybe tops. He ended up luckily recovering the deer, but he accounted for, a minimum of 6 to 8 inch drop, and he didn't get it. So how are you, and I've seen many of those types of situations over the years. Like, oh, this one was high tense, had him pegged, and he dropped this much. And that one dropped that much. And I've seen all this data, and I can't deny the truth of what I've seen there. And that probably doesn't happen nearly as much with, say, a tree stand hunter or ground blind hunter, because they probably don't have you pegged and are looking right at you.
Dude, they're when you're in on them or they're in on you, they figure out ways to know that something's wrong, right?
Yeah, well, I'm saying they still react, but I don't think that reaction is quite accentuated to the same degree as a mature buck that's actually staring right at you and like, oh shit, what did I get myself into? Versus you just stopped one and he's like, what the heck was that? And then you send it. I think that reaction might be a little less, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, when if they catch your wind, and they'll stop, look, and they'll look right up in the trees, and then the second they lock eyes with you, that's what you're kind of saying, right? Is like, it's,
you don't got much time.
when they're, so that you can say that from what you've watched and in your experience from what you've seen, that the deer that are kind of on to the fact that something's there, something's wrong, that is the dropping and the distance and the aggressiveness of the dropping like coexists with that.
Right. Their fight or flight responses, obviously a deer is going to flight,
Right.
so they're, once they're put into that, like a guy that stops an animal, that animal, if it don't sound natural and casual to that animal, he's
Right.
automatically, his flight responses are kicking in. So he's prepared.
Right.
And so where I was going with all this is I've seen all these data points, and it's like, that's when I had that epiphany moment back in 2010. And that animal was at 26 yards. And that arrow was, I figured, I ran the numbers because I had the speed of when the arrow left the bow to when the arrow arrived. And I figured it was around 15 yards out of the bow before the animal started reacting. And I watched him get damn near 10 inches of drop.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that animal didn't drop any faster than any other animal does. It's when he started the reaction. From the time he started the reaction, it's not like, oh, that one was super quick. No, he's about the same speed, but I didn't account for that much drop at 26 yards. I aimed low down by the heart, but that wasn't enough. I still hit him no man's land. And I kind of just watched that arrow frame by frame, and I'm like, holy shit, I can't believe I never put this together anymore. Like, I can't put so many eggs. Like, I want to be the most accurate shooter I can be, but if I'm going to be honest with the truth of what I'm seeing here, I can only put so much emphasis on that. Like I can't, you're talking about a big margin of error in accuracy potentially between these situations. So I'm like, okay, this is where I got to start to look at, like, okay, penetration, infliction of damage of what I'm going to do on that animal, and shot angles. That's why the head-on shot naturally, without me kind of like processing it all. Well, 2010, that was a deer. That was the first one I shot head-on, and it's like, well, I don't have to think about the reaction nearly as much. So my ability, the kill ability, goes way up because of that factor. It's a smaller kill zone, but however that deer reacts, if you're shooting a good broadhead setup, which I wasn't shooting a great broadhead setup that particular year for a head-on animal, but it still performed very well for me, luckily. But I started to put a lot more eggs in the basket of, that's why I'm so particular about what I shoot on broadheads. Like all the guys, whitetail guys now that are in my crew shooting compounds, they're shooting a cut on contact 1.5 inch Grizzly Stick Silver Flame XL. And Tanner's shot probably a couple hundred deer in his life, and he's shot several with that head now. And he's like, there's no question. I've seen marginally hit deer that I don't think we would have recovered with other stuff. And it's like, okay, I've kind of like honed it in as like 4 whitetails and 4 compounds. This is the best one I've found for how we hunt on the ground. Sometimes you got to shoot through grass. You don't see something in the way, some twigs. You got deer that are coming in head on. It kind of offers the best of both, all those worlds. It's like, yeah, I'm giving up a little bit of accuracy maybe compared to expandable heads, but I'm still able to, like those guys are still able to group with that head long range, to the point where it's not really going to matter with what I've compared the data of how an animal reacts and the amount of reaction. It's not really, it's going to even out. In fact, it's going to be higher when you're running something like that because your killability goes up.
Dude, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, like, penetration and infliction of damage is a variable that I can control. So whereas accuracy, I can only control to a certain degree. So I actually put that as more of a pinnacle for me to do the absolute best I can do in that department. And still, that doesn't mean that you get slappy with accuracy. You still want to push your accuracy as high as you can, but I no longer, like in the old days, I was all accuracy focused, and I no longer, for many years, I haven't thought that way.
This is so timely, like for, just for me, like what you're saying is, I'm going to when we disconnect, I'm going to send you this video. A friend of mine that was going to listen to this, Scott, he had a deer coming in on him. They were filming, and it looked like the deer, I don't know if he had wind, movement, whatever. He knew something was up. But he
Yep.
was kind of standing around, right? Like standing around, maybe trying to figure it out. He'd turn a little bit this way, turn a little bit that way. But he never took his attention off of. He was basically, obviously I'm watching this through the camera lens that the guy's filming it on, right?
Yeah.
So this deer's onto them, and he finally does a thing where he turns and maybe he's going to slowly walk off, and Scott lets an arrow go, and that deer dropped. I mean, to see the deer and the reaction and everything, and it just, like, when you're talking about this, I'm like, oh yeah, that deer was just totally, he was already at level 9, right? And when that
Right.
bow went off, he went to 10
Yeah.
versus a deer that's just calmly feeding or maybe chasing a doe around, is clueless to you're there, is going to have a totally different reaction, right?
Right. Right. And Tanner, that doesn't surprise me one bit. It's not very often you come across footage that a whitetail deer, and I'm talking whitetails here. Like, I don't know all the other species and how they react, but whitetail, it's not very often you find footage of one that doesn't react at all. It happens occasionally, or very, very little. You're talking minute, but generally there's some level of reaction that happens. And Tanner, I mean, he'll tell you straight up. Many times he'll put them in high tense. He'll get full drawn and he'll put them in high tense flight mode because he can predict that a lot better. Like, if I put him in high tense flight mode at this distance, I know I've got to aim 4 inches under their chest. And he's done that many times. And I can't argue with it because it's a more predictable in some ways way to, I mean, he's comfortable with that and he's done it a lot and he's been very successful with it. He doesn't necessarily do it all the time or every time, but many times he's done it.
Oh,
So, I mean, he just shot one here early September too, just to give you another example. He shot one. So I set him up with his compound setup this year. And I went with an ultra stiff spine, which I think is really important for a couple of reasons. When you're putting a fixed blade head on, you don't get so much flex through the air. You also don't get so much flex at the bow going off. So anytime the arrow's flexing, whether it's at the bow or at the impact or throughout the flight, you're losing energy, much like a suspension system on a vehicle, or if you swung an axe and that handle bent some, like flexed some, you're not going to split a timber very well with a handle that flexes.
you wouldn't have a spring-loaded axe head.
Exactly. So it wouldn't work out very well. So he's got a pretty short draw. I didn't want to set up, and a lot of these ground situations, you don't get time to range animals. So he's got to kind of factor that into his head. Like, I think that deer's at 35. It's now or never. And so I set him up a little bit lighter than I would have liked. He's shooting 72 pounds. And I set him up lighter than I would have liked. 503 grains is where it come out to be. But I set him up with a 240 spine at 26 inches. And, with his fixed blade heads, he flies really damn good. And he just got back from a hunt that he had a high tense. He figured the buck was 4 years old. Not a big racked animal, but pretty massive base and just has that 4-year-old body look. And he acts it too. The animal pegged him. They're at 54 yards. By the time that he shoots, the animal completely does his drop, is coming back up and turning. So he's already into full ignition movement mode. And his arrow hits him low shoulder, and dropped him in his tracks. Not a spine hit, but that's just one example there. And I can give you a few more over the last couple of years. Marginally hit deer. Jeremy Funk hit one high neck. There's not much in high neck, and he hit one there. He ended up getting the deer. 160 70 some inch buck, in that particular case. But the point here is a marginally hidden deer that he still recovered. He still got it. He had to put in some woodsman skill, effort and things to make it come together. That's another department that I think, it's like, that could be talked about on a whole nother deal. But, Chancey hit one last year. The animal, he was in some grass. He didn't realize the animal turned a certain way, and his whole body, and he ended up shooting the deer right in the hindquarters, broadside, when he thought it was like quarter and two. If my memory serves me right, he definitely thought it was a different angle. The animal kind of did something there, and he hit it there, and 150-yard walking blood trail. I had a guy I filmed last year. He led this deer. I don't know why he led him, but it was like 8-yard shot on the ground. And he led the animal, and he barely nicked its, throat, which that could have happened with any broadhead. I will say that. But the animal went 15 yards and piled up. I seen that one that I was telling you about with Tanner at 34 yards that didn't hardly drop at all. He was shooting that setup. And he shot the white of the belly, and that deer went about 250 yards, and he gave him about 4 hours, but he was stiff as a board when he walked up to him. He should have, you would have thought never would have got that deer. So that's where I'm just giving some examples of where it's like,
right.
I started putting a lot more focus on that particular, it's like a pillar of archery for me. And it's the most important one for me, and accuracy is still a very important one, but I don't put it up there on a pedestal like I once did back in the day for that reason.
Yeah, that's good. And I think in general, maybe the space has moved that way. Well, it was that way for a long time, right? And then like everybody got obsessed with speed, right? Like,
well, they got obsessed with speed and then accuracy, and then they had trouble getting their fixed blades to fly. So then the expandables come out and give them their accuracy back, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it's kind of putting perfume on a pig, right? I mean, you want that good, heavy, straight flying, true arrow with like maximum capability to cause damage on the front of it. Yeah, I just feel I feel like it's been going in that direction. And traditional bow hunters, right? They never left that space. Like that was always just the way that it was. And I'm glad we're having this conversation right now, because it's got some things that I wasn't really thinking about. Now I'm thinking about going into, the coming weeks. And then my friend sending me that video, I looked back at it as you and I were talking here. This was actually a pretty nice buck. And that thing ducked. I mean, yeah, I'll send you the video, but like you're saying,
send it
like,
to me. I'd love to see it.
2 foot, it looks like, it's like, and the arrow's halfway there when the deer starts to move.
And when I said 16 inches, I mean, that sounds extreme, but it's like, I don't want to, I want people to get the point here. Like, it doesn't matter. The point is, there's a lot of margin of error and accuracy on whitetails, especially when they're high tens, I realized, like, okay, cool, I can hit 12 rings, all I want, but my accuracy on an animal is still just, it's going to be that if I'm going to hunt animals where most of the time they're going to be in high tense mode, it's going to be very hard for me to predict they're exactly how much this particular animal is going to drop in a matter of a couple of seconds. I got to factor all that in. And then I still know from what I've watched over the years, they're not always you're not going to get that. You know what I mean? You're not going to be able to achieve that 12 ring accuracy on a deer. And that is one thing that I can say is 100% true, is you're not going to be able to achieve 12 ring accuracy on whitetails if you're going to be hunting them in intense situations and they're high tense. You'll be able to do it some of the times, but you're just not going to be able to. You're going to have times where, well, I thought he'd get 6 inches of drop, but he got 10. Well, you know, here again, the point is I had to kind of like reshift my thinking on archery. Whereas I was of that mentality, just like lights out, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I mean, the first 5 years of the videos, you see me grabbing other people's bows and all that. It's because I was so comfortable from over the years when I worked and set them up in the sport shop, and I got programmed how to shoot and learned all that process. And I was so confident in it. And then, I shot those methods in that way for 9 years, and I began towards the later stages of that to start to see the holes of where I was like so focused on that I not forgot. I just never really put that much focus. I shouldn't say that though entirely, because I shot one blade heads back then quite a bit too. And still, in fact, I still got my whole collection that I've bow hunted with over the years.
Nice.
So I don't want people to get the wrong impression here. Like absolutely become the best accuracy shooter you can, but don't. What I would suggest is don't be naive like me and think that like put some. So then it comes to like, okay, what can I do here? And that's where it's like, okay, what can I do in the penetration and infliction of damage? Like, okay, I'm going to shoot a broadhead that is going to do very well penetration wise, whatever body angle they're at, and it's still going to cut a decent amount of material. Because you think about it, like just take an 1.1/8 head. Well, if that penetrates on a head end animal, if that penetrates through the entire animal with ease, you just cut. If an animal's 48 inches long, you just cut 48 inches by 1 inch material. The animal ain't gonna live. You cut too much. It wouldn't even matter if you didn't hit the lungs.
Right.
You're gonna cut so much that they're dead. They can't live with that. And then you go to a 1.5 inch that still is one blade. It's gonna penetrate, very well when it hits bone. That's why I don't shoot bleeder. I got a buddy that shot 550 grains last year, 70-pound compound, was shooting a one blade head with the bleeders. The broadhead stopped on the impact right on the main shoulder of a 3-year-old buck. He's got the photos. The guy shot it during gun. It's got his broadhead in it. And that's all the further his broadhead made it. That's why I personally don't mess around with all that stuff. It's just one single blade, just like an axe has. And I'll go bigger in that same cut direction.
Right.
Because it doesn't take that much more resistant force. Kind of like if you took an axe and it's 3 inches and you tacked another axe on in the same direction, same blade direction, you're still going to split that log pretty easily. But if you put that inch the other way, you just created a wedge.
Yeah, there's a lot of give and take on deer hunting, right? I've been in that scenario before, and I've been in the scenario too where I was like, hit back, hitting the paunch, very little blood, and I mean, it's just times like that where I was like, man, I've been on this blood trail before with a 4 or a 3 blade broadhead, and it's a lot easier to follow.
Sure.
So yeah, there's a lot of variables there, but I completely agree with I think the cut-on contact solves a lot of problems, right? A good cut-on contact head with a reasonable diameter is, an endurable one at that is you don't need too many frills beyond that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I can't agree more with that. I mean, it's back when I started, it was like muzzies were pretty hot back then. But, obviously I look back and I got those, like I said, in my broadhead collection. But, a cut on contact is the only way that I'm going to, run.
Yeah. Same for me.
It just makes the most sense there, and I think that's why what you kind of said there, as far as like the blood goes and marginal hits, like if you're shooting, the reason I haven't so much shot that bigger 1.5 inch out of my longbow is because I'm shooting a longbow, right? So I jumped down to an 1.1/8, so I'm assuredly penetrating full through that cavity. The last thing I want penetration is more important to me than infliction of damage in terms of size of the head. Once I have enough penetration force, like I'm starting to hit some numbers where I'm going bigger this year because inch and an eighth, I'm blowing through that animal, whichever direction they're at. I'm going through them. So I'm going to go bigger now. Now it's time for me to go bigger. All the compound guys, that's why they run a 1.5 inch. They kind of get the best of both worlds. They get ultimate penetration, and they still have great blood trails and things like that. But that blade's running in one direction. So when they hit major bone, it's going to go through, at least on a deer.
Yeah, you would never put a chisel tip on your steak knife, like
Yeah, right.
you want, you want that thing to cut on contact. And then also, like when you think about a firewood wedge, it's
Yep.
long and slender, right? It's not a
Right.
harsh, I'm trying to, not a harsh angle where you're just trying to
Yeah.
pound the thing through with excessive amount of force. Like, and as long as you're buying a quality broadhead with, out of a good metal, that point should be able to resist the bone, or hold up to dense bone, and that's your wedge. Like you're trying to drive in there.
Correct. I think that's, wood isn't bone, but we can use, to a certain degree, we can kind of picture how it's like, okay, yeah, you wouldn't have an axe with a tip like a Muzzy, like you said. And I don't want to pick on Muzzy. I'm just using that.
No, but yeah, it's a good. It's the
Um,
yeah chisel tip.
or like you said, the wedge and how it's slender. There's many factors that lead to great penetration, and it's like I'm gonna fill as many of those as I can that make sense. So like I said, like with Tanner being a short draw, he has some trajectory issues, right? He doesn't get that longer draw. He's got a very short draw, and he doesn't have time to range find a lot of these animals. So I set him up lighter than what I would have ultimately really liked to put some dirt in the hole of trajectory. But then I was very careful to make sure, like, he's doing things, like, obviously he's shooting bullet holes without fletchings. It don't matter with that shaft. If he puts a 125 grain point weight on or a 200, it's a bullet hole through the paper at 3 yards. And a 315 grain point weight on that same shaft without fletchings is barely a little rip low, just straight down low. So he could literally put on, but if he put fletchings on, it'd be pretty much right there. But, it's like, okay, I'm going to give up some arrow weight with him so he gets some trajectory back for his short draw. But all these other factors, like making sure your arrow, I didn't do that very well with my longbow in those earlier days. Make sure my arrows, I had underspined arrows for what I was doing. And you see them sometimes in the videos, kick. And that's the only deer that I've lost with a longbow in 12 years is one that I never should have lost. It was one at 3 bow lengths, but I wasn't shooting it properly. That arrow wasn't spined right for that bow. And I knew it, but back then I didn't, I couldn't justify the money right then at that time. And I was like, well, 10 yards out of the bow, they're straightening out pretty decent. Well, at that short distance, that kind of more slapped the animal. And I still never should have lost that animal, even with where it hit it, but I did. And that taught me a valuable lesson. Not at the time, I didn't really put that together as much back then, but I did over the last couple of years. I took a strong look at that, and I was like, I didn't shoot with great precision accuracy with my longbow. That's not why I picked it up. I picked it up to put some holes in some other departments. And I was like, okay, once I get accuracy a little bit further along, I was focused more on other aspects, and I was still getting decent results. But that was a screw up on my part looking back on it. I should have it wouldn't have taken me much time. I should have bought a couple spined arrows, tested them, fine tuned that, but the thing with traditional gear is I didn't have a great release for a long time. And so if you don't have a great release, it's really hard to get an arrow that's find what arrow you're spined for, because you're I don't shoot with an anchor point, and I don't. And for a long time, I didn't have a good release while I was shooting without an anchor point. So
Right.
that basically hurt me for a while. But I truthfully, I didn't think I'd probably be able to find. That was part of it. I didn't think I'd be able to probably get that spine dialed in because I had such a radical release.
Yeah, and well, frankly, so do a lot of people, and they don't even know it. Nowadays everybody's taking so much media, and the cameras are nice, and the people shoot a lot of slow motion video, and
Yep.
they love to put a slow motion video clip of their arrow coming off their bow with a Luminox shooting at a target out in 60 yards, and it's fun to watch as hell. I enjoy the shit
Yeah.
out of it. But because I had the opportunity to spend some time with a world class archery coach, I
Yep.
understand the importance of having your release, and it's is mildly entertaining to watch people and see the high percentage of people that are just they're not really maybe conscious or fully conscious of that because I wouldn't have personally, if I had looked at that video and saw that was me, I would not want to post that. I wouldn't want to post that. I certainly wouldn't want to send it to my archery coach.
Yeah. Right. Well, and I mean, let's put it this way. I've got a much better release than I had for long years. It's much better. I'm still working on it all the time. And I try to treat archery that way. Like, okay, here's where I'm still need some work. And then, once I get that further along, it's like I shift to another aspect of what I'm doing with it. And it's like, okay, I can put a little dirt in this hole. And so my release is still one that I'm working on, and it's different from what most would teach today. Doesn't mean that it's wrong, but I haven't fletched arrows for my out of my longbow. I haven't fletched arrows in probably 5 months. I shoot them all bare shaft. So when I'm practicing, I get to watch exactly what's going on, and that's really helped me clean up some different things on my release where I can still do what I'm doing with how I shoot the bow, which is pretty radical, but I have a good release. So I've cleaned it up in a lot of ways. I wouldn't say that I've perfected it, but it's much better than it once was.
Yeah, and
So,
I don't want it to sound like I'm being hypocritical or picking on anybody. I only understand this because, like I said, I had the opportunity to spend time with Tom Klum Sr.,
yep.
world class archery coach, and he, pointed out that like, hey, you're doing this and you need to be doing this, and now I see that and I recognize that, and yeah, it makes a huge difference, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's you got to think about it like you got a string, and then you're pulling it back to that distance, and it doesn't take much tension to send that string a little bit further one direction, like sideways with the bow, and all of a sudden, and so when you're shooting, like I shoot a pretty radical draw, and so it's taken a long time to really dial in my release method to get that. And like I said, I've dialed it in a lot. I'm not like perfectly satisfied with it, but I'm much happier with it than I've ever been by a long shot. And I'm still able to have in some other aspects do what I'm able to do with the longbow, that's a whole nother deal.
Well, that's responsible. A lot of what is responsible for your arrow flying true, right? And when my friend Brian Broderick said this years ago, and I never forget it, is just like your nock has to be flying true behind your broadhead. And if your nock is flying true behind your broadhead, you're going to get outstanding penetration. And if that is off of a percentage of a degree, just think of yourself hitting a nail on the head with a hammer and coming from an angle versus hitting it straight on. And it's all the difference in the world.
Yeah, and that makes sense. That makes total sense. Both, on each end of the arrow, you got a node point that doesn't flex, and so ideally you want when that arrow hits. So like one of the ancient subcultures of archery, in all the ones that I've studied, I actually haven't found where they used paper as a method. And I think paper's still a great method. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I mean, I use paper. But one of the methods that was very interesting to me is I found this one subculture. They would shoot through glass. And if their arrow shattered the glass rather than pierce it, like a bullet will pierce glass, that's how they were able to determine if their nock was aligned with their point when it.
Seems like an expensive way to test.
You would think that's what I thought when I read it, and it made a lot of sense to me. But they were very particular about for penetration reasons.
Sure.
Was the main thing. I mean, accuracy too, but they talked more on the penetration.
Yeah.
In order for that arrow to penetrate, that's how they matched that arrow to that bow. And also obviously they talked a lot about the release, and they would work mainly. That was what they talked about. If it shattered the glass, if they knew that arrow should match that bow perfectly, then it was like the release.
Sure.
Is what.
Yeah, well, we have the luxury of relying on speed and modern equipment to suck up a lot of that problematic, but they didn't have that luxury, right? Like they were working with lower poundage bows and not that high quality. I guess I don't know what a fast bow was back then, but it's not.
Well, actually, that would actually surprise most people. Their bows, a lot of those ancients shot much heavier poundage bows than anything today. Well, I shouldn't say anything, but for the most part, and their bows, the ones mainly what I study, they're very sophisticated bows, and they actually it would surprise people the amount of force that those bows would send out of longer draw lengths, the composite built bows of how they would build them. And there's many different variations of those types of bows, but I mean, the highest poundage I've found of anybody shooting back in ancient times was 240 pounds.
Oh my God, what?
And he shot a bullseye. I found multiple that have shot. I found multiple 200s, not super I shouldn't say it's not super uncommon. It's not super common, but it's not like a surprising thing back then to come across that 160-pound bows.
Really?
To be part of the elite forces of certain cultures, like 133 pounds was a standard, like X amount of shoot, like you had to be able to shoot that. And so
wow,
if you could shoot that weight, generally you could dry pull, like at 133 pounds, you could dry pull right around 200 pounds.
Yeah, I had no clue.
So 133 pounds would be like comfortable. It'd feel like a kid's bow to them. So yeah, there's a lot there. That's mainly what I study is ancient cultures of archery.
Yeah, I had no clue.
It is. It's pretty wild, and a lot of this stuff sounds pretty bizarre and out there. But I really, the further I go down it, I really don't think that very much of it is just. It sounds mind blowing, a lot of it, but as I go further down the train, it's like, no, this was, and it makes sense. I mean, that the bow back in them times was like the pinnacle of ownership of any materialistic thing you could have back in them times for a lot of those cultures and things.
I understand that.
It was your means of food. It was your means of defense,
right?
And it was everything. So
I could see that.
Anyways, we got talking archery a lot, but
that's cool, man. I had no plans to go down that rabbit hole, but honestly, I'm so glad that we did, because all that is so relative to being a successful, archery hunter. And man, we're just, like I said, we're knocking on the door here going into the season, so it's like fresh data. It's great. It's gonna affect me. I'll be thinking about these things in the coming days. So let's do this. Yep. we're we're coming up on 2 hours here, and I want to kind of wrap up on this. I want to ask you about your project, the disc set digital release that you're. I don't know how you're doing it. I haven't talked to you about this. I don't. I do know that you're doing a disc, but I don't know what your plans are for digital distribution. But
Yep.
what happened? Anybody that's followed you for an extended period of time, like myself, watched all your DVDs throughout the years. Every year you put a disc out. Something
Yep.
happened here a year or two back. You maybe had a little bit of a lifestyle change. I don't know. But for whatever reason, you said, hey, maybe I don't need to put one out this year, or this is such a big What happened? Why did this
Sure.
take the period? Why did you approach this and decide to do this the way that you did differently than you have everything in the past?
Yeah. Um, Boy, that could be a lot. So I'll try.
I know. I'm
I'll try
aware of
to.
that.
I'm just going to be as frank and transparent as I can here. Part of it was the magnitude of that fall. It was our best fall we've ever had by
Gotcha.
far. Well,
Gotcha.
I shouldn't say by far, but I mean by a pretty good stint. And obviously, I've already told you the amount of footage and everything. So it was a monster project. But basically, the project before that was also a very big project, Resurgence. And honestly, what really set us back, and I didn't plan to not have a release last year. It's just that's the way the cookies crumbled, and I didn't plan to have a late release this year. But again, it's just that's the way it's happened, so far. So what happened is I got done editing early November on Resurgence the year before. And I mean, I was just as burnt out as you could possibly get on something. It's like 13 years in, I've been doing this. I'm grinding. Yeah, I mean, it looks great. You see the 10-hour video, and it's like, boy, they have a lot of fun. Well, yeah, obviously I have fun, and I have some good times in there, but it's just like, I just, and this had been going on for a while. I mean, people were even sensing it and feeling it in the videos and mentioning it to me at shows. Like, it doesn't seem like you really just enjoy it that much anymore. Da da da. And it's like I'm trying to put on this fake pretend that I am enjoying it. And I mean, I have moments and I have times where I did, but I mean, the amount of hours and effort that went in over the years, just and no time for myself to. I didn't even know what I enjoyed anymore. Like I didn't. I just fried myself completely, and then I get out of that hunting season, and so it was very short again for me. I didn't get out there till like a weekend in November, and from editing, and I got out of that in January come, and I needed to get some work done on the computer for this project, and I went to get behind the computer, and I couldn't. I literally could not like function behind the computer, like. And I tried to do it, and I tried to do it, and a month went by, and stuff that should have taken me 2-3 days to do took me that month to do. And I'm like, this is not good. Like, I just couldn't turn that creative part of my brain on. I was like, I don't know what's going on. I'm lost. Like, I've always been able to just jump behind it and do it and get it done, and and even if I didn't really want to, I could just do that, and other stuff that didn't require creative thinking, no problem. I need to do the dishes, clean the house, change do something on the vehicle, whatever, stuff like that. Like, no problem. That stuff was simple, but any of that kind of creative work, I couldn't do it. And I didn't know why. And so that took me the better part of last year to kind of rethink a lot of things in my life, figure a lot of things out. And it's a monster for me to try to describe exactly all the different things, but it basically boils down to, I kind of burnt myself out. the hunting was the last part. And when I got out there that fall, I didn't even enjoy myself that much. And I was like, okay, that was the kind of like the last thing. And it's like, I was like, after that, when I was starting to figure things out early last year, I was like, okay, if I don't even love this anymore, what am I doing this for? What, like, and then it was like, well, I think I actually deep down, I think I would love it, but I haven't taken care of myself. I haven't done things for myself, whatever that might be. And I'm talking simple stuff. I mean, it could be just cooking yourself good meals. It could be a little bit of exercise. I mean, any of that stuff. It's just like I wasn't properly taking care of myself. And I kind of suspected that it would all kind of come back if I just started, taking care of myself and everything. I expected that love of what I used to do would probably come back, and it has. It's come back. I mean, it took a long time to figure out, and there's still things that I'm kind of figuring out, and I'm very excited about a lot of different things with it. We got some post-production things in the works right now for future projects that's all shaping up pretty well. Because I don't want to have this happen again where I'd like to have not have late releases, but still output a good quality product that when we started this podcast, you're like, oh, you produce really great stuff. And it's like, well, I still want to keep that standard, but I want to have them coming out obviously on a timely fashion. And, and that means I can't carry the load so much myself anymore, and it's going to take a year or two for us to, train the right people to where I don't have to carry so much of that weight to that. And I can still kind of have a somewhat, I don't want to say normal life, but, now I cook for myself 3 times a day. I eat healthy. I don't exercise every day, but, fairly regularly, nothing extreme, but, I love shooting longbow. That's one thing that last year I ramped that up a lot. Like I've shot a lot of arrows in the last 2 years. I mean, a lot. And I absolutely love it. But, I remember a buddy of mine, lifelong friend of mine. I mean, I was so embarrassed by it. I didn't even talk about it to anybody, not one person for months, and it was April last year. And I kind of talked about it with 2 of my best friends. And both of them told me some great advice and different things. But one of them said, well, you just need to start taking care of yourself. Like, what do you enjoy to do? And I was like, when he said that, I was like, wow, that sounds, it was like a relief that came over me. But then it was like a light bulb moment. Like, I don't even know what I enjoy to do anymore. Like, I don't even know what that is. That sounds great. I don't know what it is, and that's when I was like, okay, all right. Like, if I don't even know what that is, but it sounds good, I got to figure that out. And then probably all this other stuff will come back.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened. So, I mean, I could expand quite a bit on all that, but I think you kind of get the picture there.
Yeah, you restructured your foundation. Everything's built upon your foundation, which is yourself and you taking care of yourself. Your physical health and your mental health are directly correlated. There is no way to get around that. And so I feel like I'm hearing what you're saying, and I got a pretty good understanding of it. Not exactly what you're saying, but I went through something here in the last year, 2 years, same thing, just into a pattern, right? You get into these patterns, and that's what you do for your life, and then you look back and you're like, how'd I get here? Like, oh yeah, I've been doing this every day for this many years, and now this is where you're at. And it's like, well, let me try a different road or a different pattern or something and get back on track. So I'm definitely understanding what you're talking about, man.
Yeah, exactly like you put it there. You get kind of, we're humans, so we're very habit based. We get stuck in this way, and we're comfortable with that, and pretty soon it's a rut, and then if you run down that for long enough, it doesn't matter what you do, you can love it to no end. But if you do that all the time and never and give up all these other aspects of your life for it,
Right.
eventually
Yeah,
you're
there's going to
gonna
be some
and people warn
resentment.
me. I mean, I had friends that warned me for 10 years, and I was like, nah, that won't happen. And they're like, no, the way you run, it's gonna happen. And they were right eventually. And so, yeah, and there are some internal things, obviously, with all that. I mean, I felt so lost for a period of time because my mind's a very analytical mind, so it's very like I got to figure this out, like, and I felt so lost because it's like it was such a monstrous mess that it was like just trying to figure it out and start to cover ground on what was going on, why I couldn't function behind a computer, and so many different aspects. I mean, that took me probably 6 months just to like, okay, I'm starting to see things here. Like I had theories. I had like, okay, maybe this is why, or maybe this. But to really like, it really boiled down to I needed to take quite a bit of time for myself to do those things. And then I really was able to see the light of day to put my theories about what caused this, what led to this, and be like, okay, now I get it. Yep, that is actually what happened here.
Yeah, that's really cool because I do feel personally like majority of people will go through this at some point in their life at some level, and to be able to recognize it and deal with it is cool. And you know, I recognized just the difference with you when I would call you and we would talk. Back in the day, it was always like, I got it. I don't mean to cut this short, but I got to get caught. And you were just always under the gun, right? And then, in the last year or two or whatever, call and be like, hey, what's going on? It was like,
Yeah,
cool. Like you sound chilled out
yeah,
and relaxed, and I can see it in your demeanor
yeah,
and so.
yeah. I mean, even like that's another good aspect. Like good friends of mine and stuff. They'd be like, "Hey, you want to do this?" No, I can't. I need to edit. I need to do this, or I got this show, or I got this, and even on the relationship side like that. And thankfully, they all understood. So it's not like I lost relationships because of it. They all understood, but it's like that exactly what you just said right there, like under the gun. And it's like that's how I operated. And now I don't. I've really kind of went strongly the other way. Like after we get off the phone tonight, yeah, I'm gonna go work till 2 a.m. This morning it was almost 4 a.m. before I went to bed. But I was working. But and I'm trying to figure that out. Like I'm not quite the night owl I once was. Like it used to be just all around the clock into the next day, and then catch a few hours of sleep, and then I mean I was zombied out. And then then you try operating like that, and you go to shows and you're zombied out, and people try talking to you, and it's like, man, that guy's a dud. Probably is what they're thinking. Like, man, that guy's like a zombie. Talk to him for 2 seconds, and
That's
you
funny.
know what I mean. But you're just so drained that it's anyway. But yeah, I mean, that's another good aspect that you brought up there. Just now it's like if a buddy right before you called me, I had a real good buddy of mine called me 15 minutes before the podcast. I hadn't talked to him in a month, and it's like we caught up, had a great conversation, and he's one of my great friends. And so many times he'd call me in the past, over the years, and I'd talk to him for 2 minutes and be like, "All right, dude, that sounds great. Great to hear from you. I gotta go." And he's one of the ones, like understands, like they all pretty much did. Like I said, but still, it's like I could actually enjoy that conversation. Like, how's life been? How's it been going for you? And I think we're all as human beings naturally wired. Our instincts are naturally like wired to do that, but then we have the stresses of today's with I got to get this done, I got to get that done, I got to get this out, and you forget about, maybe not forget, but you just kind of get into a rut of that pattern, kind of like what you're talking about with the rut, and then pretty soon it's like over the course of several years, all of a sudden, and I hope this doesn't happen to anybody else because it's not fun. It's not not fun to go through.
Well, it's
But
gonna. It very likely could, but having heard a conversation like this and being able to recognize it, because it happened to a friend of mine and he talked about it publicly,
yeah,
and I recognized it from the stuff that he talked about. So, it's very helpful.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, and everybody might have a you know different situation. Well, everybody does have a different situation, but what worked for me might not work for other people to get it straightened out. But I mean, you put your mind to it, and that's one thing. Like, although I didn't, get very much done on this project last year, and that I wasn't a complete slap ass that just laid around. It's like I did a lot of things. Like, obviously we talked about, like, I did a lot of shooting bow, and I got really, you know, I mean, that was a lot of fun for me and still is to this day and everything. But, you know, in a lot of other ways, I just grew in many different ways, in many different aspects. And I just had faith that I'd find my way through it all. And so if anybody else out there is going through it, I mean, just put your mind to it. Like, you know, whether you got to jump on Google and start Googling around, like I had to do that, all that, kind of stuff, and figure out, I had a lot of different social anxieties and all kinds of different things, and I'm not going to go take medication for that. It's not it's, in my opinion, it's not the answer to the heart of it. And so it's like, I really want to get to the bottom of it. But yeah, it took me a long time. It took me a long time to turn the corner. And it was around September last year that it started going the other way. And it started, and it's like, okay, all right, we're going to be fine here. And, obviously throughout that period from then, even till now, and now that I'm on this, it's like, how far can I go?
Yeah,
Like
right.
how much more can I improve my life?
Yeah, that's what I'm
And
talking about.
exactly. It's like a never, and it's, now I look at it like it's a never ending thing. And that's the same thing that I was talking about with archery, a bit ago. It's like, in my mind, there's no arrival to it. It's like, okay, I need to fine tune this a little bit more. I need to work on this a little bit more. And I treat that same type of mentality now with life. It's like, okay, this is how far I've come since September of last year. Like, wow, it's been a great ride over the last year. What's the next year? Like, let's keep this going. Like, let's keep making our lives better in whatever way. And I'm not perfect by any means.
Well,
Far from it, but yeah, I got a lot of things figured out. But that's the way life is. It's kind of like the economy. It goes up and down, and I don't think, now that I figured a lot of this out, I don't think I'll ever go through that sort of a low again.
yeah. I
Um,
I
you kind of know the pathway, and you catch it, and things like that. And so I don't think it'll ever go like it did. But
yeah. Yeah. You know, it's like in nature there, and we are the same way. I don't think we can escape it. We're like a product of the natural world, right? And like grass is the perfect example. Trees do the same thing. Everything does the same thing. You're either growing, like the grass is either growing or it's dying. It never just stays green and the same level. It's either growing,
right,
it's either in a period of growth or it's in a period of decline, right? And
right,
you, by using your brain, can dictate that. You can decide if you're growing or if you're, going in the opposite direction. And unfortunately, you can't just be in this holding pattern, because eventually, if you're in this holding pattern, you will just recognize it as decline, or your body does, or your mental health does. I don't know. But if you're just incrementally getting better, you're growing. I think that's it. I mean, I think that is that's kind of the remedy, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I, I couldn't agree more. I mean, and that's a great point. Everything is either growing and expanding or it's dying. It's not stagnant. Anything living,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
what you described there. I heard something a while back that I really liked too is life's a bitch either way, right? So those things that you really want to do in life, yeah, they're going to take work, but life's a bitch if you don't do it. So, and it might be a bitch doing and pursuing whatever it is you want to pursue,
Right.
and in this case, I'm in a little different situation where I pursued something I really wanted to do for a long time. I did pursue that thing and I pushed really hard, but I gave up a lot of other things. And so then once I rebalanced myself out and restructured myself in my life, now I've had to, kind of be like, okay, you can't live in that world forever, right? Like, oh yeah, life's great, like, you can't, yeah, at least not in this society.
Hippie
You can't
propaganda.
exactly, or you're going to be living in a van, right?
Exactly.
I really liked that. It's like, it's tough either way, and I've obviously listened to a lot of different stuff from different, whether it's psychologists or whatever. Another important one. I think this was, I heard this. I think Joe Rogan said it. Like what the heck was it? It was just on the tip of my tongue. Just get moving. Just get moving. And I think that's why even people that exercise, if you're doing it for yourself, it does make you, it has an internal psychological thing that just makes you feel better about yourself. And I'm using that as an example. Like, I kind of found out for my own self, like it was really clear picture when I look back on it, is it's like there's a handful of pillars every human being, in my opinion, needs in their life, and they don't have to have them all, but they gotta have at least a few. And one of them's diet, exercise, pursuing something worthwhile like your career and being good at it, relationships, friends, family, that would be. And there's what's I'm missing the other one. Oh, like a routine, you know, and it's like when I looked back at after I got through all this shit, and I looked back at it, it was really clear picture. And for my own personal self, I just not going to talk about this much, but I throw God in there. Like that's actually my first one that I throw in there for my own self. And it's like I looked back on those handful of pillars, and it's like the only one I had, and I think, a pretty rare specimen that I was able to operate pretty well for 13 years on pretty much just career. Like I didn't have diet, I didn't have exercise, I didn't have I did have somewhat of a routine, I guess not a very healthy one. I dipped out on a lot of my friends and family when it came to like whatever it might be, whether it was just conversations on the phone like you described, or like 4th of July, like get together, grill out, whatever, those. And then my faith side of things, all those were pretty low or even non-existent hardly, except for career. And then because I drove myself so far into the ground, all of a sudden, all of that just like, I got so burnt out by it that career was the only pillar that was holding me up for all those years. And now that's gone. And all these other pillars didn't exist for me,
Yeah,
really,
sure.
or were very, very small, and they couldn't hold the roof up no more. And so once I started taking care of myself, and I figured this out without like actually laying it out with like these pillars like I do now. I kind of just figured that out. But then when I looked back, I was like, wow, it makes sense that I crashed. because when that one pillar that was holding everything up for so long crashed, there was no other pillars there holding me up. And so it just came natural once those other pillars went up and I got myself straightened out. Well, then all of a sudden it's like I got the juices flowing for the career again. And I mean, career is maybe not the right word, but, you know, pursuing something that you find meaningful and you enjoy and you love to do and you find a benefit or you find you find it good for other people. You know, I mean, I did a show back in August and I had a kid that was 11 years old come up to my booth and he's like, you know, he actually had sent me a picture in the mail of a buck that he shot on the ground in the timber, 11 pointer. Him and his dad went in there and he come by the booth and he was just all jacked up, you know, real nice 11 pointer on the ground. And the next day, a 13-year-old kid came by with a very similar story. And it's like, for a lot of years, I didn't even really look at that aspect of it. Like, is what I'm doing beneficial for other people? Or is it worth, does that kind of make sense?
100%,
Is it
100%, man?
Yeah. So that's what I mean by career, I guess, is pursuing something that you enjoy and really are passionate about and love to do. But without those other pillars, or at least a few of them being pretty strong, that's, in my opinion, that's why the whole thing ended up, you know, crashing for me for a period of time there. So,
man, that's so fantastic. And I wanted to bring that in because, like, I'm very excited to see this project that you're going to release because I know, like, I don't know. You did it differently. You took the time, like, you didn't, I feel like, you know, old Jared might have just ground himself right into the dirt. Like, we're getting this
I
thing
would have.
done on this day and nothing else. And I think it's cool that you took the latter route. So I expect it'll be maybe a touch of a different production, but nonetheless, the same high quality content that everybody's used to historically with Whitetail Adrenaline. So I'm pretty excited for this thing to come out and to be able to see it,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very similar format, but again, I feel like the overall production quality is, I think, you know, the pinnacle of anything that we've produced. You know, obviously we've had certain hunts or certain events and things that have happened on video that it's like, you know, like Chancey's canoe buck from a couple of years ago. You know, people love that, and it's like, you know, that's hard to replace that, right? That one event. But I'm saying as like a whole production, I'm very, very happy. You know, it's not done yet, but I'm far enough along in it all that people are going to like it. So,
So let me ask you this: you got a DVD? You're gonna do as you traditionally have done. You're gonna release a DVD for everybody. I'm thankful for that because I still utilize a Blu-ray and a DVD player and really enjoy. I really enjoy my collection, and I continue. Listen to this. I was at a kind of a senior housing thing a few weeks ago, and there was a couple milk crates of DVDs and VHSs in this warehouse or whatever. And I said, "What is that?" And the guy said, "Oh, old lady passed away. I'm throwing that in the trash." And I was like, "You mind if I didn't tell my wife that is a little old lady that passed away, that I brought her DVDs and VHS back here to the house. But nonetheless, I continue to expand my collection of DVDs and still even VHS, and I'm grateful that somebody's still willing to put that content out in that format. So you're doing that, and then I assume you're probably going to do a digital option.
yeah, exactly. Both. So this year, what we're doing is we're combining both. You know, for a lot of years, we did round one and round two. Round one was the bow edition. Round two was the gun edition. This year, almost everybody, over the years, we've realized almost everybody buys both. So we're just including it all one package.
Nice.
It's going to have 6 DVDs in it. And I mean, I could still make it 8 right now with what I've cut it down to. I could still make it 8 and pretty damn good. But I mean, I'm going to be cutting some pretty good stuff here coming up real shortly. Like I'm still working on the cut side of some of it. Some of it I've got locked in, but nonetheless, it's going to be 6 in that one box set. And then, yeah, we're going to launch it on iTunes, and then down the road, it'll come out on Amazon to buy on there as well. Amazon's HD, iTunes is 4K, DVD is obviously standard def. Trust me, I want to keep the DVD sales going as long as I can, because they take a pretty good margin on those digital side of things, but it's also exciting to see the content in that higher quality that you can't do on DVD. So
Yeah.
I do want to say thank you for everybody that we launched that loyalty pre-order, and we didn't have an exact ship date. We increased our prices some. We didn't have a DVD release last year. There's a lot of things there, but I mean, I'm not kidding you. People came out of the woodwork for it, and I just want to thank everybody for that, because honestly, like from my perspective, it's just like, wow, that, especially without us being very active on social media, it's just really cool to see that, especially when we're selling DVDs in 2022, and to see how many people just came out and bought it. I just want to say thank you to all you guys, and yeah, I'm pushing to have it in your hands by Christmas here. So okay. I know it's going to get tight. I am going to get some bow hunting in this year. So, but not till November. So,
all right. Well, I think it's probably a product of my age, but a vast majority of your audience probably is our age, and maybe they recognize what I do is I recognize and value quality these days over quantity. So the fact that they know what they're going to get from the production, I can understand that you would have that type of reaction. Yeah. So, and I'm of that thought process too, is just kind of like, all right, I'll wait. If this is how long I have to wait, if I have to wait 2 years, I'll just be more excited when I get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I mean, even with this project, I'm looking at ways to improve the production quality. The audio is going to be the best it's ever been, for sure. And things like that. So it's like, even though this project's taken longer and I went through all that, it's still, I'm not, quality is one thing that I can't push that out fast and have it just kind of, it's just not everybody's got a different thing that makes them tick. It's just not my thing. It's like, I got to put it out there in what I vision it as, being on a high quality scale. And that's just kind of how I'm wired, I guess.
Nice, dude. Well, hey, is there anything in closing? Shout out, obviously, the website. You said the pre-sale already went out. You're saying potentially around Christmas is what you're thinking?
Yeah. I kind of put it out there by Christmas. It's I've got one. These are going to be, so each disc is kind of going to be like its own, like almost like episode, but really it's like a movie, because they're about 2 hours long a piece. And that's the format that's going to go on digital too. And I like that. And I like that kind of way that we've kind of shifted things a little bit there. But I lost my train of thought where I was going with this.
That's all right. Yeah. No, you're talking about changing your format, and the discs are going to be like a little bit of a movie, 2 hours a piece. Digital's going to be the same way.
Yeah, exactly. So, God, I hate that when
Well, I've thoroughly done my best to fry your brain here tonight. I've ran you through.
Thanks. I was supposed to do another 5 hours editing here after we got out.
Well, maybe I don't know. Maybe we'll all our deer talk will have you re-inspired to get in there. And I am gonna send you, after we hang up, I'm gonna send you this video. You're gonna laugh. The fact that that's like one of the freshest text messages in my phone is a deer jumping the string on an arrow going off, and a pretty nice buck, and we're having that conversation. That's fun, man. So I guess what I was asking is, like, is there anything else in closing that you want to maybe mention or whatnot, and then obviously, it's whitetailadrenaline.com is the
Yep.
website that houses all. I mean, you got a big, thorough catalog of the best, my opinion. It's the best whitetail content that's ever been captured.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, dude,
That says a lot. That
I
says a
believe
lot.
it. I mean,
Because
I've
that's
been
there's a
consuming
lot of
this.
guys out there that put out a lot of good content,
Well, yours is
and
unique, so
yeah. Well, it's it comes with a price though. It
yeah,
comes
yeah, dude. I'm listen. Everybody knows now, right?
yeah, right. So
Yeah, it comes with the price. Yeah, yeah. You
yeah.
gave up a
No.
lot, and you put in a lot, and you got out a lot, and yeah, it's understandable the cycle that you went through. But I'm glad you're out the other side. I'm
Yep.
glad you got this project coming out, and so let's wrap up on this. Like, what are you doing? Are you gonna get out deer hunting? I mean, you're still
Yeah.
editing,
Yeah,
and
I'm gonna get a. We didn't really talk about that. I had been contemplating it for many years, and I finally just another one of those lifestyle changes a bit. I finally made the move to Iowa. Um, I didn't do it for the reason of deer so much. That's the one thing that I couldn't ever wrap my head around was just moving just purely for the deer. But for a lot of other reasons, and I really am glad I did. I really like it. So obviously, providing the DNR approves my residency, which they have no reason not to, then I should have my residency here.
nice.
I'm already eligible, so I'll have that in my pocket. And then a couple other hunts, another bow hunt. So I mean, I'm going. I'm not going to get that much hunting in this fall, but I'm planning on killing two with a longbow. So that's what I got in my head. Like pretty sure of myself there, but we'll see. Anything can happen. It's hunting, you know. But I'm pretty fired up about that. And I got a couple gun hunts. I may, depending on where I'm at with this project, I may scrap one of the gun hunts myself. But all the guys, Chancey, he'll be back in the swing late October. Tanner kind of kicked off here a little bit ago, just for a short bit, early September. But then, he'll be kicking in here later this week, and then he's going to run pretty hard. I mean, the last two seasons that we have filmed that hasn't been out, those are our best two seasons. And I think this season, I just kind of got a feeling this season's going to be right up there with those as well, with the way things are just, I can kind of see the writing on the wall a little bit with different individuals that have this tag for this state at this time and things like that. It's like, okay, we're going to have a good fall here the way I see it. So, yeah, we're not super active or haven't been on social media, but we'll probably get that fired up here a little bit more and get that cranking. And I mean, we got plenty of pictures and content to do it with, I guess. So.
Right. Well, that's awesome, man. That's outstanding. I'm thankful for everything that you've done and the work that you've put in. Like I said, I really do mean that. It's my favorite. It's like my personal favorite. It's just some of it's just so intense. Like you can't really find that level of intensity with a lot of traditional whitetail deer hunting content. So thinking
Sure.
outside the box and the amount of effort that sacrifices that you've made, they don't go unrecognized. So
Thank you.
yep.
Thank you. Glad to hear that. So, and yeah, in closing, I guess we're kind of at that time. So I just want to say again, thanks to everybody for hanging in there through all this and just being very supportive of it all and patient. And I know like last year it was people were getting a little antsy, like, where's our videos? They got used to them coming out every year and everything. And I didn't,
Right.
it was tough to kind of address that on my end because I feel, I was feeling like I was letting people down quite a bit there.
I get that. I get that.
But no, thank you to everybody out there that hung in there all these years and hung in there the last two. So this future content will be great. Don't worry.
Oh yeah, man. And at some point, eventually, we will drag you up to northern Michigan and do some type of big woods deer hunt at some point. I know it'll happen.
I would love to do that, and I don't even care if I just shoot a doe. Like I would be fine with
but
that.
You're gonna be in good company.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm not going to Michigan to shoot a big buck. If it happens or I kill a decent buck, okay, cool. But more for that camp experience and everything. So
Good.
we got to make that happen.
You'll have your mind right going into it. So that's awesome. Sweet, man. I greatly appreciate it. I'll kick this out here. It's going to go out this Friday, so I'll let you know when that happens. And thank you. Best of luck to you on your deer season. And
yeah, keep me posted on how it's going out there.
100% will. Thank you, Jared.
All right. Thanks, Kevin.